Welcome to U.S. Defense Line Channel. Explosion sounds echoed in Russia. Critical Russian military points were bombed by the Ukrainian armed forces against the border region of Belgorod. Violence of operations is increasing in Putin's dream Donbass. Even in one day, about 100 attacks of Russian troops were repelled. Operations started in critical areas on the Luhansk front. More than 400 Russian soldiers were neutralized in a short time. Ukrainian planes carried out 7 airstrikes on critical Russian military points. Operations and violent clashes on the southern and eastern fronts continue to advance in favor of Ukraine. Moreover, the war is not limited to these fronts. Now the war has spread to Russian lands, and Belgorod is starting to become the new front of the war. Ukrainian troops are on the move again in the region. According to breaking news, the Ukrainian armed forces launched a bombardment in the Belgorod region. As a result of the bombardment, explosion sounds echoed from the region one after another. It has been reported that critical Russian military points in the Shebekino and Karabanovo regions on the front were targeted. Military infrastructures in the regions are also thought to have been damaged. The fact that these attacks were carried out twice in the evening shows that they may have been carried out with a strategic goal. It is known that these border regions are very close to the Kharkiv front. As long as the Ukrainian troops increase their territorial control on the Kharkiv front and become more deployed, they will be able to make more moves towards Russian territory. Moreover, the Oskil River line, which goes close to this region, is of great importance for both countries. Especially the fact that this river is located in the middle of the Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv fronts makes its position more critical. As the areas under control in these 3 regions, which are among the most important regions for both countries, increase, it will be more possible to deploy and advance in more areas. Ukrainian armed forces are destroying many Russian military equipment with their precise moves on many critical fronts. Ukrainian missile and artillery units, which have carried out hundreds of shooting missions since the beginning of the war, hit more than 12 Russian military weapons equipment areas, a Russian command center, and an anti-aircraft defense system with accurate moves this time. These severely damaged points have been rendered unusable. Russian forces carried out 10 missiles and 10 airstrikes in response to these attacks. Additionally, it launched 42 attacks using multiple launch rocket systems. The fact that such attacks are decreasing day by day shows that Russia's current military resources and equipment are starting to decrease gradually and that the Ukrainian defense units are able to achieve more and more success. Ukrainian President Zelensky made critical statements about the Donetsk front in the east. Zelensky reported that fierce clashes still continue on this front and that about 100 attacks that Russian troops tried to carry out were repelled in one day. He also stated that the Ukrainian soldiers fighting at the front never bowed to the Russian troops and that all the resisting Ukrainian troops were real heroes. He also stated that Russian troops were not surrendered in any area on the front lines, but rather responded. Zelensky added to his important statements that soldiers have positions everywhere and are preparing for success in certain areas. Achieving great victories is now a matter of time. Ukrainian troops again neutralized 420 Russian soldiers in a very short time. Also, 7 Russian armored vehicles and tanks were destroyed. For Moscow, the situation in the war is getting worse and worse. On the Russian side, which loses tens of its military equipment and hundreds of soldiers every day, the tension reaches its line phase. This leads to an increase in tensions between commanders and leaders. All these tensions also lead the commanders to important mistakes. As a result of the mistakes made by the commanders, the Russian soldiers are puzzled about what to do on the fronts where violence has increased considerably. Moreover, these Russian soldiers, abandoned by their commanders, also suffer serious losses on the fronts. Ukrainian troops are pushing the Russian forces very hard with the moves they have made towards important points on critical fronts. Thanks to their strategic advances in the regions, all kinds of Russian logistics points and ammunition storage areas are hit and destroyed one by one. With these moves of the Ukrainian units, a successful momentum is being achieved in many critical areas. In particular, the development of the experience of the soldiers during the war and the increase in the available resources thanks to the help from the countries ensure greater success. Operations and mutual clashes continue increasingly on the Luhansk front, which is another key factor in Donbass. Ukrainian planes carried out 7 airstrikes, this time on areas of Russian military equipment. It was reported that these attacks were carried out on the Luhansk front. Successful advance of the Ukrainian troops on this front continues. Ukrainian army, which makes moves towards critical areas, especially at logistics points, is making such moves that it seizes or neutralizes all critical points of the Russian army one by one. As a result of these moves, the Russian soldiers have a very difficult time both while providing supply flow and attacking. Ukrainian armed forces took action in the Novoselovskoye region on this front and started operations against critical points of the Russian forces. Clashes continue in order to gain dominance in many regions. It is stated that after the increase of the territorial controls provided in the Kherson region, additional Ukrainian forces came to this eastern front, thus starting the fierce fighting. At the same time, the Russian forces continue their attack attempts, using the last military equipment and ammunition they have. Attack efforts have increased on the Kupiansk and Luhansk fronts. This time, it was reported that he opened fire on Myazazorivka, Makiivka, Nevsk, and 5 more regions on these fronts. Even if the Russian forces continue their attacks, it seems that they have started to use the latest ammunition and still have not achieved any success. On the Luhansk front, it is stated that the Russian army wants to pass between the regions. In addition, it is observed that difficult ground wars are approaching in many regions on this critical front. If the Ukrainian armed forces can maintain full control on this front, it will be capable of dominating a fairly large area. Aware of this, clashes are constantly taking place between the Russian and Ukrainian forces for these critical regions. It is known that many Chechen and Wagner Group soldiers also took part in this eastern front. Ukrainian army continues to successfully struggle with these 3 groups of soldiers fighting against it. Moreover, it is seen that the Chechen, Russian, and Wagner Group soldiers are struggling more and more each day against the Ukrainian forces and suffer serious losses. This situation also increases the tension between the leaders. Due to increasing tensions, failures as a result of wrong decisions reach serious dimensions. It is known that relations between countries have a great influence on the course of the war. This time, Turkish President Erdogan reportedly held important meetings with the heads of state of both Russia and Ukraine. After Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on November 18, Zelensky also held a phone conversation with Erdogan. In his statements regarding the meeting, the Ukrainian leader said that in this phone call with Turkish President Erdogan, he praised the extension of the grain agreement. He also stated that he thanked Erdogan for supporting the grain initiative and assured him that he will continue to be the guarantor of stability in Ukraine's food flow. Within the scope of this meeting, issues related to security and energy cooperation were also discussed. As it is known, such negotiations are of great importance for the course of the war and the economic situation of the countries. Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, which is also a mediator country, discussed the possibilities of continuation of the grain corridor and diplomatic negotiations between Kiev and Moscow in his phone call with Putin. In these days when the violence of the war has increased considerably, it is of great importance for the countries to hold such meetings. For this reason, every decision made by the leaders will determine the course of the war. In time, we will see more clearly in which direction the soldiers will move and what decisions the leaders will make. Any decision made by leaders and commanders is now much more critical. Moreover, the advances on the fronts will determine the fate of the soldiers in the course of the war. We'll see what happens in the next few days. We have reached the end of another video. You can support us by liking the video. You can easily follow new videos by subscribing. I wish you all a war-free day. See you.